Comic books provided by Dronda Comics, downtown Glendale, Arizona's premier comic book and toy collectible emporium. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another comic book review from Chaotic Fringe. Got 4 books that I'm doing today. The first one is Action Comics number 9. Now, Action Comics number 9, I'm going to say I kind of understand, maybe sort of kind of what Grant Morrison was trying to do with it, but other than the novelty of having a black Superman as president, wonder where he got that idea from. There wasn't really anything special about the issue. It was basically an alternate Earth story, and you had Superman was black, and he was the president, and that was it. That was a story. It wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't a bad story, but it wasn't a good story. It was almost like there wasn't really a justification for the story other than Superman was black and he was the president. There wasn't even anything. I mean, they kind of touched on the slightest possible thing that, oh, well, gosh, maybe Lex Luthor might be mad at Superman because of prejudice, but Luthor says he wasn't a racist. I mean, he shouted that out and kind of showed it wasn't. It was the same motivation Luthor always has about Superman. And kind of when we saw the Justice League or their version of the Justice League and they were all black, I was like, okay, so now we got a black Justice League. It just wasn't, it was just kind of a story that was there. That was it. So it's kind of a bad review, but not a, wow, this really stunk review. We aren't talking, I'm going to hate to say this, but we're not talking like Mr. Terrific territory, but it just kind of was like, what was the justification for the story? The next one, Ultimate Spider-Man 10. I am loving these Ultimate Spider-Man stories. I really am. And this one gives an interesting dilemma. You have, we find out that obviously what was already known, that the Prowler is his uncle, blah, 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 blah with that. But the uncle gives an interesting premise on training the young kid on how to be Spider-Man. And you can see the kid struggling with it, and normally you'd figure, oh, this is like an easy dunk, no way possible. But you have also that mutant element. Now, it's not as overt as you would think, but he basically the Prowler threatens, I'll tell your father. And as silly as that sounds, kind of, if you just read the book and you saw that line, you might say, that is like the dumbest thing to say. When you've read the other issues going up to that point, you understand him telling the father is a big deal. It's not some little light thing you're telling to a little kid, but it still has that kid dynamic that the kid is justified in fearing what his father might do if he found out he was Spider-Man, if he was now this thing that his father has railed about all his life. So it gave an interesting dynamic to what could be a Spider-Man story. And the ending of it, again, the way it ends, I won't spoil it, but the way it ends, this issue makes sense. And it makes me want to read the book even more. So this book has definitely hooked me on this new Spider-Man and reading about this new Spider-Man. Love it. Now, we're going to shift gears and go to DC, which of course had much fanfare with their Big 52, and they've canceled a lot of issues. And of course, with canceling a lot of issues, they brought in some new issues. So let's start off with Earth 2. I picked up Earth 2, really figured it was going to be, oh, this is going to be a slam dunk, not going to like it review. I got to say, I don't hate it. That's not saying I love it. That's not even really saying I like it a lot. It got me interested in reading the next issue. I can't really go into what the issue does that is, I think, kind of sort of unique. I'm saying kind of sort of, I'm giving like all these kind of maybe sort of possibly could be's to the story because I don't really want to give away too much. it obviously ends a certain way because of certain other books that are out there with this. But what's nice about it is this is really a fresh start with the characters, though I did mention Mr. Terrific, and Mr. Terrific is going to show up later on. He's not in this issue, but he will be showing up later. But I'm finding the way that they're setting up the story right now and the characters that they're going to have in it, they actually may take a different take on these characters to where they are truly different, as opposed to um, just some minor cosmetic things in the characters are different. So there may be hope for this of actually truly being a different take on the characters. I'm going to give it some time. We'll see what happens. One book that I read this week that I must say, loved it, loved it, loved it. And I know why I loved it, and it's kind of frustrating why I loved it. Dial H for Heroes. I was not a Dial H for Heroes fan. Never really have been. I mean, it's a cute little concept, but I never was a Dial H for Hero fan. And I heard the premise vaguely of it with the new book, and I'm like, eh. And then I saw who was writing it. Not someone who had really written comics before, but of course an established author, so you expect maybe this might be good, or at least give a different take on it. He does a different take on it. And you know what? The different take is very British. I've got to say it. So it reminds me a lot of old Vertigo books. Like old Vertigo books before really there was Vertigo. When you had the British invasion in comic book writing that came in. This is what this reminds me of. The characters are kind of out of left field. But because they're out of left field, you go, this is strange, but I likes it. And that's what this is. You really, well, I shouldn't say you. I really felt that the approach they're taking with the story is rather good, because you are dropped into the middle of this, not in the middle of the story, but you're dropped in where we're not giving you an explanation of how it's working or why it's working. And when you actually see the heroes that are conjured up, to me, they're British in the sense that they're very strange in that sort of weird, strange British sort of way. It's really strange, but again, you look at them and you go, these are kind of cool in a sick way. So, and you can't also, let's be real, you can't go wrong with a Brian Boland cover. You just can't go wrong with a Brian Boland cover. Okay, so you can go wrong with a Brian Boland cover, but if all else fails, you at least have the cover to look at and say, the book sucks, but the cover looks good. In this case, the cover looks good and the story's good. So giving this, again, another couple of issues, but if the first issue is any indication, this is going to be a really well-written book. Whether it sustains that, who knows? But right now, love it. So that's it for now. Those are the 4 books I've kind of put to the forefront for me to read. I'll be reading more. I'll be doing more reviews. I will see you next time.